One Saturday morning when I was 2 years old, I woke up hungrier than I'd ever been. Down the hall, I could hear my parents snoring off their hangover. They wouldn't be up until past noon at least. I vaguely remember climbing over my half-collapsed baby gate and waddling down the hallway to the kitchen. I twisted the little black knobs on the stove just like my parents did, but no scrambled eggs appeared. Instead, the stove made a mean hissing noise, and the kitchen filled with a nasty smell that I didn't like at all. The smell kept getting worse and worse, and I had a feeling that I'd get into the worst trouble of my life if my parents found out. I went back to my room to play with my blocks, hoping that the problem would just magically go away. 5 minutes later, there was a loud knock on the door. My parents grumbled all those 4-letter words that they'd told me never to say, and then I heard my mother sniffing. She said the house smelled like gas, whatever that meant. My father staggered out of the bedroom with his jeans and shirt half on, then yelped when he reached the kitchen. Windows and doors flew open. I crept downstairs to see what was going on. "How'd you know?" my father said breathlessly to the shadowy figure on our front doorstep. "No." The kindly female voice sounded confused. "No what?" "I'm Eliza Mortimer from the end of the block. I was just dropping off these cookies that I baked to welcome you to the neighborhood." Coincidence or not, Eliza Mortimer had saved our lives. And not for the last time. 2 years later came the first of many plate-shattering, furniture-breaking, screaming matches between our parents. I was crouching down in the closet with my hands pressed over my ears, but the sharp knock sounded as loud as someone rapping on my own skull. I tiptoed out of hiding and opened the door. "Hello, young man. I'm Eliza Mortimer from the end of the block. I'm in a bit of a pickle, and I could use your help." The woman on the doorstep was short and stocky, with frizzy brown hair, bright green eyes, and round frame glasses. She wore an old-fashioned black dress with a wide belt and stood with one hand on her hip. In the other, she held a small red notebook. I'd never seen her before, but for some reason, I knew her voice. "Okay," I smiled. Behind me, the battle had stopped. I felt my father's damp hand on my shoulder. He'd been washing the blood off of his knuckles. "If it isn't our favorite neighbor," he sneered, "what can we do for you?" "Well, I started a new recipe before I noticed I was all out of sugar. Can I borrow a few cups?" My father shrugged and nodded. "Sugar," he grumbled, as I followed him into the broken battlefield of our kitchen. "Who the fuck borrows sugar at 10 p.m.? A goddamn work night." My father shoved a wrinkled bag of rock-hard sugar into my hand. "Tell her she can keep it." "Oh, this ought to be more than enough. Give your parents my thanks, Ethan." As I waved goodbye, it occurred to me that I'd never told our odd neighbor my name. Miss Mortimer came by a lot over the next 5 years, always with a good excuse. A missing cat, duct tape for her garden hose. Once she even wanted help with a crossword puzzle. She didn't always arrive in time to stop my parents from getting violent, but she always showed up before anyone got seriously hurt. I didn't know how she did what she did, but by the time I was 7 years old, I loved her for it. I wanted to spend more time with her, but my parents wouldn't hear of it. "Nothing good can come from a kid hanging around strangers," my father said darkly. Although, as I would soon learn, he'd been spending quite a lot of time around strangers himself. My mother's response to discovering his extramarital affair was downing a cocktail of pills with a vodka martini. No matter how much I shook her, she wouldn't wake. And if Miss Mortimer hadn't just happened to have been out for a walk when I ran crying into the street, she probably wouldn't have survived. With my mother in the hospital and my father off with his mistress, it was Miss Mortimer who took care of me. "I wish she could stay here forever," I told her that night, as I sat in bed sipping her hot soup. "Instead of them." "That would be lovely, dear," Miss Mortimer replied. "But I can't. Perhaps, though, there's a way that we can keep in touch. Would you like that?" Miss Mortimer walked over to the inside of my bedroom door, bent down and drew a small chalk circle with a series of odd symbols around it. White marks that looked like letters, but weren't. She gently pushed the door closed. "Now," Miss Mortimer grinned mischievously, "put your hand inside that circle and open the door at the same time." I did as I was told. Instead of the drab hallway I was used to, my bedroom door suddenly opened to a cozy room filled with bookshelves, well cared for plants, and an enormous antique desk lit by a single brass lamp. I tried again several times, always with the same result. Then when I removed my hand from the circle and opened the door, the hallway was back. "That room you saw is my study, in my house at the end of the street," Miss Mortimer smiled. "Now, if you ever need anything, or even just to talk, you know where to find me." "But how—" I couldn't even say it. "See these symbols around the circle? You must never remove or change them in any way. If one should happen to get smudged, let me know right away and do not use the circle until I fix it, no matter what. Understand?" I nodded. I thought I did. "Good. Now get some sleep. Your mother and father will be home in the morning, and they'll need all the help you can give them." Miss Mortimer wasn't wrong. Both my parents eventually came home, but they refused to speak to each other or take care of the house. Dirty dishes and overflowing trash bags piled up like monuments to the disgust they felt for each other. They mostly ignored me. Just another bitter reminder of the lives they could have had. And honestly, that suited me just fine. I stayed out of the house as much as possible, reading in the local library, playing in the cul-de-sac with other neighbor kids until the streetlights came on, and visiting Miss Mortimer. For the next 2 years, anytime I had a question or needed to talk to an adult, I just put my hand in the strange circle and stepped into Miss Mortimer's study. She was always ready to feed me something delicious, listen to my childish problems, or even just give me a clean space to draw. As far as I was concerned, stretching out on her big Turkish carpet with my sketch pad and a cup of tea is the best feeling in the world. With my trusty crayon in hand, I'd try to recreate the unsettling images that I found in Miss Mortimer's old books. Women with mouths in the back of their heads, men transforming into hyenas, children with a single eye in the middle of their foreheads. While I talked and sketched, Miss Mortimer would stir the black cast-iron pot that was always bubbling on her hot plate, or take notes in her little red notebook. The cozy little room was my home away from home. The one place I felt safe. Until suddenly, it wasn't. Just like on most afternoons, I had tossed off my backpack and opened my bedroom door with one hand on Miss Mortimer's chalk circle, eager to tell her about my day. But the study was empty. The little brass lamp was turned off, the hot plate was cold, and Miss Mortimer's favorite teapot lay shattered on the Turkish carpet. Something terrible had happened. I could feel it. Before I could investigate further, however, I glanced through the open door behind me and saw a sight that frightened me more than any of the monsters in Miss Mortimer's old books. My mother was rooting around in my bedroom. "Where'd you come from?" she slurred, as I appeared suddenly behind the door. "What are you hiding back there?" I could smell the booze on her breath from 3 feet away. My eyes darted to Miss Mortimer's circle, betraying me. To my horror, my mother picked up a pair of gym shorts from the floor and began to wipe the chalky symbols away. "It's not enough that I bust my ass every day to pay for this stupid fucking house, is it? No, you go and draw all over it. Ungrateful, that's what you are, just like your deadbeat father." "Stop!" I shouted. But I couldn't push past her in time. My path to Miss Mortimer's study had been completely wiped away. "Don't you dare talk back to me, mister. Now listen, I ordered us a pizza. We're gonna have dinner like a normal goddamn family tonight, understand? I've had enough of you skulking around up here." As she dragged me by the collar to the kitchen, all I could think about was the gloom in Miss Mortimer's study and the broken teapot on its rug. One way or another, I had to get back there. After my mother stomped off to bed alone and my father passed out on the couch, I snuck out into the oily darkness of the garage and fumbled around until I found a tin can full of sidewalk chalk. I hurried up to my bedroom and sat staring at the inside of my door, trying to recall Miss Mortimer's odd symbols. There had been one that looked like a tree with no leaves, two that were more like crow's footprints, a fourth with the appearance of a heart stabbed through with a spear. The final two were the hardest to draw. Just thinking about them made my head hurt. But 10 minutes later, I was pretty satisfied with the circle that I'd redrawn on my door. It's true, it wasn't perfect, but I had to try something, didn't I? I took a deep breath, put my hand in the circle I'd drawn, and pulled open the door. I wanted to cheer. I'd done it. There was the study, shrouded in darkness. The little brass lamp and the hot plate were both in place, but the shattered teapot was gone. I wondered if maybe Miss Mortimer had cleaned it up. That'd mean that she was all right, after all. I sprang to the door, sure that she'd be proud of me for recreating her circle all by myself. My breath came out in a cloud of bluish white. It was cold in the study. And the floor felt wrong. Squishy, almost. Like it was made of human skin. I shuddered and reached out for the drawstring of the little brass lamp. When I turned it on, the bare bulb emitted an eerie, greenish-blue glow. That wasn't all that was different, either. I could see now that what I thought was a pot was actually more like a cauldron. Greasy bones and hair floated in the coagulated soup. Instead of Miss Mortimer's vibrant collection of plants, stuffed crows and animal skulls lined the bookshelves. Their uncanny glass eyes seemed to follow me as I tiptoed across the weird, squishy floor. I wasn't sure why I was being so careful. Hadn't I always been a welcome guest in Miss Mortimer's house? Most disturbingly of all, there was a breeze in the study. Wheezing gusts of air that seemed to blow down from the ceiling. When I looked up, however, all I could see were layers and layers of something ragged hanging from the ceiling, a substance halfway between tattered cloth and spider's webs. Like everything else in the dim light of the lamp, it had an awful bluish color that reminded me of dead things rotting underwater. I took a deep breath and kept walking forward. Up ahead, I saw an angular hallway that led to the rest of the house. I froze. The hallway hadn't been there before. I was sure of it. Was I even inside Miss Mortimer's study at all? I'd been so excited to find her that I hadn't even considered the fact that I might now be somewhere very different. Somewhere very, very wrong. I could feel that weird, erratic breeze on the back of my neck. Smell it, even. A cold reek like meat that had gone bad in the freezer. I spun around and looked up for the second time and saw its source. It dragged its distended body towards me through the cobwebby rags with 8 spider-like limbs, each caped by a horribly human hand. Its face was a nightmare version of Miss Mortimer's lanky brown hair, pupilless white eyes, a jaw that was opening wide enough to swallow me whole. "Run!" The voice of the real Miss Mortimer boomed in my head. It came out of nowhere, but it snapped me out of my paralysis. As I sprinted across the spongy ground, those awful hands grazed my hair and tangled in my shirt. Fabric ripped as I squirmed free and flung myself back through my bedroom door. I slammed it shut, but heard a hungry pounding from the other side. I hastily wiped away the less-than-perfect circle I'd drawn and scrambled backwards, breathing hard. Now I understood why Miss Mortimer had warned me to never, ever alter the symbols around the circle. But I wasn't ready to give up. I just have to find a different way into the house at the end of the street. For those of you guys that like getting cozy while listening to stories, I want to let you know about Etsy.com/shop/ivorymonocletea. That's my wife's tea shop. She sells hand-blended teas. There's CreepyPasta-based teas if you want to get one that's a flavor that you like, or there's Mr. Creepypasta tea, which happens to be a tea that I drink fairly often. You can also ask for a dabbing sticker. If you ask her for a dabbing sticker, you get a special one that I made for her to use on that jar, and she told me not to use it. So I like telling you guys to go ask her, because then you get a special one, because then she's forced to admit that I made a really good concept, even though it's very silly. Etsy.com/shop/ivorymonocletea. A big thank you to Jordan Alexander Sanchez, Jakob Fenske, Stephanie Butler, Jordan Humble, Chance Burnett, Diana Kraus, BrimstonePandemonium, Caltuna, William Wellington, Emma, Brenna Crow, LaQueda Canizales, Smiley the Psychotic, Dante, Kinkade, SimbasBloodyMojo, Mephistopheles, CursepoxPrimarch, Bastion Beefcake, M, Jesus Cornejo, Yargul, Clownable, Amber Clark, Jay Kearns, Dakota Lane Whetstone, Himbo Jerry, Crusader Chocobo, Adamarius, Estebean, Nate Cull, Our Minsect Time, Xylobones, Angelus, Seclude, Salty Surprise, Lebeda Galvin, That Creepy Chick, Red Shadow Cat, Turtleman, Cryolinian, Mr. Marcus Blitz, Ika Limchalk, Dirty Diver 030, Matt Bach, Voice of Sand, Fikamel, Melted Lake, Tolly Sue, William King, Darth Miver, Sashi Suzaku, Croconut 509, Stricket, Freddy Krueger, Lisa Cottrell, Hades Nephew, Acid System, Mog, Kiri the Sloth, Fester's Lampshade, Nico Kyle, The Ginger Bros, Aaron Stormcrow, Daniel Polson, and Corey Kenshin. To all of you guys, I cannot thank you enough. Thank you for being a huge support to me. Thank you to everybody who's in the description down below, and thank you to everyone who can even support $1 just on Patreon to help keep the content coming.